Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading. So I thought I would read a few poems from my last book of poetry, which came out last year. It's called Interstitials. And then after that, I'm going to read an excerpt from one of the stories from my collection of fiction that came out at the end of August. So the first one feels appropriate to start with because I've been substitute teaching this year every day. School is open as usual up here, so at least in my part of the state. So this is After Subbing for a Kindergarten Teacher. As I laze under the weight of a 2-ton headache, hyperbole warranted, a dull thought thuds against my cranium. Will the teacher wonder what happened when I stopped taking notes? I hope she will at least appreciate I sacrificed my sanity and an afternoon for hers, and that she will love her students a little more than if she'd never left, and they will have forgotten yesterday, forgiven all transgression. And that's probably about the length of most of my poems. They're not super long. The next one is called Kitchen Dancing Music. It's this kitchen dancing music that drives my hips, moves my feet, thrills my heart, fills my lungs with that oxygen alternate euphoria, joy in the abandonment of inhibition. With the blinds closed, no one else will know how my bones resound from this audio experience, making me a fool on a Friday afternoon. Had that phrase in my head for a while before it became a poem. This one is very short, the next one. And I don't know, since not seeing a lot of women my age in the audience, but maybe the other women have also experienced this phenomenon of jeans with very ridiculously small pockets. And that's what inspired this very short poem called Pockets. If only I were more like my tiny, useless pockets, unable to hold anything that isn't small, light, or otherwise unburdensome. Anything that doesn't belong. And this next one was first published in a local journal called Alaska Women Speak a couple of years ago, a few years ago. But I wrote it in college, which was like 8 years ago. And it's called Pecans. On the dining room floor in the house my dad built, there's a box, half full of close to rotten pecans, and mostly full of broken pecan shells. I want to make it symbolic, but really, we're all just too lazy to sort out the good ones, and no one has the heart to throw them all away. Maybe they would have made a great pie, or 2, or 3, if we'd had enough stamina to shell them all in the week after they'd been gifted to us, to press on through the thumb blisters and the buildup of bitter shell residue that promised an inner sweetness which, to be honest, usually didn't amount to anything. Or else we ate the fruit before it made it into the pie fun pile. So now the box is still sitting there, beneath the windowsill, among the clutter, like it was born to be there. It's become a fixture of the room, or the floor, for no reason other than its insignificance, a part of the collection of unmemorable memorabilia. Maybe it would mean something to somebody, but in our house, it's just a cardboard box full of nuts and their shells. And when it's gone, no one will notice, because everything else will probably be gone too, and all the heirlooms and birth certificates and trophies will take precedence in the preservation process. Because expensive hand-me-downs, maiden names, who assumes such virtue anymore. And evidence of someone besides us losing a game caused more fuss about where they should be stored than a box of pecans. Eventually, they'll be thrown out, I suppose, never offered the opportunity to be properly disposed of, after careful consideration. Should we save these? Nah, just throw them out. And that would be it. Anything could have been in that box. So that one was one of the longer ones in the book. And next, I don't know what the weather is like in your neck of the woods right now, but we've already had a couple days of snow up here. The snow melted, but it feels like winter is near. So I'm going to read this prose poem called Of Persuasion, which I wrote at a little local write-in on a very wintry day several years ago. And it starts with an epigraph from Jane Austen, or from a section of the book Persuasion. These were noises which belonged to the winter pleasures. Her spirits rose under their influence, and after being long in the country, nothing could be so good for her as a little quiet cheerfulness. Slush and steam, sounds of winter outside and inside, onomatopoeic but unrecognized by the masses, until they hear the hissing and the squishing and the art of getting through a December day, Alaska beating to the stretch of its own drum around the fire and ice and everything nice, but not so much as the quiet, the little quiet, small with comfort and lack of conversation, though it isn't all bad when you consider what cheer the season brings, even as the snow sinks softly through the thick air thick with feeling and spirit instead of words, until someone's broken the ice, for better or worse, tasting the sounds of socked-in solstice with their cherry tongue, with pleasure, sniffing at something unsaid, unheard in the long-lost country. If a snowflake falls in the meadow, has climate change turned the world upside down on its head, whatever that means in the vast expanse of the universe, filled with stars and galaxies like so much cosmic slush and steam, an inside-out song of shared space? It is written. These are the indelible and effortless marks of a momentary, solitary persuasion. Thank you. And switching gears yet again, now I'm mostly reading them in the order they appear in the book. I have a couple poems about my last time in Rwanda. I've been there a couple times. And this first one is called Kinyarwanda, which is the language there, and that's what it's about. And this is for my friend Elvis. That is really his name. Somebody I met in Rwanda. Following a T or an S, an H in the mouth of a Rwandan speaking English is like an accident waiting to happen, an undeployed airbag to protect the speaker from the potential pileup of letters to come, later proven dysfunctional with a hissing deflation. But try a T after an initial N in his language, and he'll laugh, hopefully internally, at your attempt to master sounds that don't exist, or don't belong to you, and maybe can't, never will. And the K? After an interior N, absent. Before an I, it could be the precursor to an explosion, like the pin pull of a grenade or the cocking of a loaded gun, albeit not one aimed to kill, though maybe to confuse. But don't get me started on the W. After an R or a B, it either disappears or brings a G along for the ride, and good luck getting that guttural sound right. What glides off his tongue comes out like a vomit of sounds from an uncouth American mouth. Even still, I make the effort, if only to understand fidelity in a new but old language. And that one, I think, is a little more effective if you've heard Kinyarwanda spoken before, which you can find somewhere on the internet. I know it. But Yeah, I love languages, and we had quite a lot of fun making fun of each other for his English and my Kinyarwanda. This next one is called Blessing, and it's for a man named Sandrali, who is hard to describe, but maybe from this poem you'll get a sense of him. Having what might be considered Rwanda's most famous architect and holy man make us pour over coffee in his posh African home humbles my heart in a way that makes me feel like royalty. What could my company be worth that it would warrant such a blessing? I imagine it's more between him and God than him and me. Whatever the case, in this moment, I will listen to anything he has to say. And back to America. This poem was written about a good friend of mine, although it also kind of sounds like a story about somebody else. You coffee yesterday. Rolling around my floorboard is an almost empty coffee cup, enough liquid left to make a mess. It came from yesterday, not long before I met you in the thick of shadowed misery, masked by gin and quin and maraschino cherries, and your funky folk singing too. It was lovely and tragic. Then I made my way homeward, ignoring the stains from last night until this morning when I looked at your life and imagined what he'd taken from you. Saw the almost empty memory of him rolling around in your sweetened, swimming head. Enough love left to make a mess. It was sublime, elegiac. And here we are now, laughing in the throes of sticky friendship. Enough of that us to make a mess of my life, if I'm not careful and ever conscious of the almost empty space in which we might forget ourselves, rolling around in and under our own influence. That's the danger, the magic. And that one's actually kind of written in a nonce form, which is maybe more effective if you can see it on the page. Oh yeah, and there's pictures in my book too. A few of them, not a lot. And I have 2 more poems, and then we'll move on to the excerpt of the short story. This one is called Little Lovely Moments. I wasn't the first to name them, these little lovely moments. But I noticed in the timbre of her voice and the wet kisses of that smiling child what you felt in a rare embrace from your best friend and saw in his eyes. The weight of these little lovely moments, tipping the ancient scales to a softer, more hopeful world. And this one is a little sadder, but it leads into the next story. Well, I think. It's called The Inevitability of Ending. And there it was, hanging in the silence. The inevitability of ending. A death unspeakable, but imminent. We wait for the moment to pass and the understanding between us to change. You watch a loved one perish, and I let you fall into my arms, comforting but feeling nothing, save your aching heartbeat, moving mine to the rhythm of your loss. And now I'm going to read a part of a story called The Voice, which is the second to last story in this book. And it's also the second longest, I think. But I'm not going to read the whole thing. So. Oh, and this, just a note on the cover and the inside, I'll show you after, has illustrations that I commissioned one of my college classmates to do. So that made the project a little more meaningful that I got to work with somebody else on it a little bit. All right, so this is from The Voice. We met at Kosciuszko Park in Milwaukee, a stone's throw away from the cemetery where he's buried. I was in my third year at the university, and I made a habit of visiting the park every day after class, mostly to read or otherwise distract myself from the fact that I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I only have a little better idea now. In any case, one afternoon I was sitting on a bench with my earbuds in, not actually listening to anything, but attempting to block out any potential conversation with anyone, when I heard someone say, "As you probably know, it's quite bold to strike up a conversation with someone who's clearly tuning out the world around them, and such an action is usually only acceptable in dire circumstances, like some creep is following you or you're bleeding profusely and there's no one around to help. Barring that, you're going to be assumed some combination of homeless, on drugs, mentally ill, or otherwise inept at processing social cues for such an approach." So at first, I ignored him, pretending I hadn't heard. Then he tried again. "Hi," he said. I looked up, ready to level this guy with my best "what the hell do you want" stare, but no one was there. I pulled out my earbuds and searched all around me. A few joggers were running on the path, and I saw some picnickers a bit beyond that, but otherwise the park was empty. I checked my phone to see if I had accidentally stumbled into some kind of help chat, but I had no apps open and all means of wireless connection were turned off. I thought I was hearing things. I must be tired, I thought, or low on coffee, or food. I didn't think about it before, but it occurs to me now that we're always trying to find explanations for things that can't be explained. I'm probably just stressed, was another thought I had at the time. It was the end of spring semester and finals were coming up, so I used stress as an excuse for any abnormality or change in my physical or psychological state. I had just put my earbuds back in, and when he spoke again, the guy was indefatigable. "Can you hear me?" I ripped my earbuds out, my heart pounding. I stood up and looked across the lake, thinking I was in one of those weird spots where you can hear someone across a long distance because of the acoustics, like in Grand Central Station or on Capitol Hill. I've never been, but of course I'd read about it. The paranoid part of me also considered that I was the guinea pig of some new high-tech top secret surveillance system some government agency was trying out. Then he spoke again. I'll take that as a yes. His voice wasn't threatening. In fact, it's essentially what made me fall in love with him. But I was determined to find him. "Where are you?" I asked quietly. I figured he had to be able to hear me if I could hear him so clearly. And I was right. "Hey, you can hear me!" I really wasn't sure if I was coming through. He sounded genuinely happy to discover this, and a smile was on my lips before I could stop it. I couldn't remember the last time someone had been so elated just to hear me say hello. But to answer your question, I'm here, in the park. It wasn't enough to relieve me or my curiosity. When I think back on it now, I realize it was actually pretty clever. If Cameron had been standing there in front of me, I probably would have ignored him or told him to leave me alone, if not in so many words. As much as I'd like to say I'm a strong, independent woman, I generally try to avoid confrontation. But at that moment, I was utterly engaged in the mystery. "Where?" I asked again. "I don't see you." "I'm aware," he said, and I swear I could hear an impish smile in his voice. "But that's all part of the fun, don't you think? My name's Cameron. I don't know what compelled me to play the game, but I did. I told him my name, and then we talked. I sat down, put my earbuds back in, and just acted like I was on a call with someone. I bet you never considered a person could fall in love with a voice, but I did. It was silky, and when I say silky, I don't mean in a creepy come on kind of way, but it was calming and handsome. Yes, a voice can be handsome too. Add that to your list of considerations. Cameron told me he was a teacher and that he'd grown up in Milwaukee but gone to college in Chicago. I told him I'd grown up in Madison and that I'd never been to the Windy City. He was astonished. "How is that possible?" he asked. I shrugged, not sure if he could see me as well as hear me from his vantage point. My parents had never been big on travel, and somewhat ironically, I was usually very hesitant to try new things, much less in crowded places. In a spasm of vulnerability, I told him this, and he basically asked me out. "Well, maybe we'll see it together sometime." My heart leapt into my throat. As thrilled as I was to be flirting with this invisible stranger, I wondered if I'd gone too far. I still didn't know what he looked like or how old he was. He seemed to understand my silence and backtrack a little. Or you could go on your own with your friends. Promise me you'll go, though, just to say you did, on St. Patrick's Day when they turn the river green. How I wish we could have done just that. But we didn't, and now we won't. I told him I'd think about it and that I had to get back to my dorm. Okay, but hang on, he said as I rose to leave. We'd only been acquainted 20 minutes or so, but his voice already tethered me, and I stopped. Give it to me straight, he requested. Is this totally weirding you out? As I said, I'm a bad liar, but I also hate conflict, to include disappointing people I barely know. So I said, a bit. Cameron sighed. I figured. Would it help if I promised to make it up to you? I scanned the park one more time, looking for a face to put with the voice. You don't have to promise me anything, I said. We were just making conversation. In truth, as nervous as I was also dying to meet him. Well, he said, undeterred, if you're here tomorrow, I will be too. I smiled and said, good to know, feeling empowered as I left. I had never been the one to walk away, but already I was changing. These days, people don't like to let on that other people change them, but I'm not ashamed to admit it. Cameron had a bold personality, a love for life that sometimes makes me angry. It's still painful to think of his existence cut short, that he won't get to watch his favorite movies and I won't hear him singing our favorite Tears for Fears songs ever again. But maybe we were never meant to be. And I will stop there. Thank you. And that was one of the illustrations from that story. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Nice to be here. I haven't read in quite a while, so this is a nice opportunity. Making poems. Making poems. Making poems is less certain than hauling semis, less delirious than kissing a new bride, less weighty than Hebrew scripture. The hand delights to steal down the page like boys out hunting garter snakes among the creek rocks. Words wander like pilgrims who peer into the poor houses along a dusty road. They cling together, not for beauty nor destiny, but for a man's slender need to repaint his house on a Saturday morning whim. Crows choose their perch as if by random, claim it like a watchtower, then suddenly are gone. Neither is there any sound reason for making poems. "9/11 kind of rebirthed this poem for me. I didn't need to rework it, but I'd worked it a lot over the last 20 years. And I used to work in a stone yard. I grew up working there, and then I worked again there about 20 years ago. And I was driving a forklift at that time. Stockbrokers. Arriving at the stone yard, the crew gathered in the break room with coffee as the Twin Towers burned on TV. And those suited businessmen went leaping into Manhattan's blue sky. Dale, who cuts and shapes granite, kept hissing "fucking bastards" through his wad of chew. I said nothing and went out to pull an order for 7 tons of Montana ledgestone. The old heister bounced under the weight. The swamp oak pallets creaked on the scale. There were thick splinters on the truck bed, and the load straps were dry in my hands. Dust wafted from the faded American flag as I wired it to the pole at the front gate. Wind was in the cottonwoods, and there were still no customers in the yard. Perhaps they were stockbrokers, the guys who jumped from the towers. Perhaps they, more than the thousands who died in the Great Crush, were habituated to something like flying high. They took in the massive heat and the smoke of burning carpet and cubicle. No doubt their lungs were seared and screaming. They fell for a long time. Arms and legs flailing, as if waving goodbye to some wife on a street corner, or a 4-year-old son watching from a window across the boroughs. I like to think that I too would have jumped for something like the need to be seen before vanishing forever, or just for that one long last gaze over the city I love. And that moves me to another aspect of this 20-year history. Reading the morning paper. Reading the morning paper. Let's not talk about faith anymore. Not confuse yesterday's lessons with this fine morning. We'll wake early, step into the quiet street, and feel the cold rain inside the body. And let the city do what it does. No good neighbor needs you and me to find his car keys and get to work on time. No schoolboy needs us to believe in bright yellow buses and playground rules. So let's just go for coffee and read the paper, its pages crisp and clean. Of course, you might glance up from the Reuters story of Afghani children who get blown up and vanish, asking whether I think theirs is a genuine crucifixion. I'll probably mutter some nonsense like, "Dear God," and "How tragic." So let's just agree beforehand, the resurrection was a big one-time gift for everybody. We'll leave it at that, refill our cups, and say nothing more about kids, the war, ourselves, and who is and isn't innocent. Child labor, a little bit of we got to shift the tone here. So this is my effort. Child labor. My boy hoists from the raked pile, dumps the frozen leaves into a muddy red pail he drags behind, like pennies collected over the happy summer. He trails me into the dim crawl space of paint cans, nails, ropes, and spiders. Gripping my finger, my boy grabs a cement trowel, heaves it overhead, and grunts like a prize fighter. What comes before child labor and long after? Marriage. Marriage. Half of marriage is the sound of her voice as the dishes linger in the sink. What you notice and how it feels. Whether you enjoy the sound of her words, careless or carefully chosen, and the gaps between. Silence as peace, as weight, as hurt, as tension in the tethering. Caress is the other half. Animal to animal, we long to be touched the same way, over and over, and for all the right reasons. No doubt, every marriage is shaped by choices, intent, effort, and all. But I'm talking about the sheer luck of the draw.
I love that one.
Thank you. I love my dear wife. 18 years we just celebrated. Well, probably 21 if you can include our, what do we call it? courting time. And we're doing pretty good.
You're so old fashioned.
Yeah, I hope so. I dearly hope so. Drinking alone. 1 pint and the day's spin unfurls to a quiet moment, lost to a couple's long kiss across the Ave. Over murmurs from the bar, I lift my finger for another and find myself thanking God for the soft glow easing her long shadows over the city's nag and hurry. Like most people, my sins are pretty harmless. Drinking alone, I see others in their tenderness. When asked, I'll say I come here to sip slow and wait for an old friend to stop by. Buzzards, turkey vultures, buzzards. Buzzards. Don't flap, squeak, chirp, or sing. Don't flit like finch down your pebble path. They circle the hollows where sun-baked critters die. In the bent grass, you find bones and carcass hide. At dusk, you see these thugs hanging around the hay bales, laughing up their little lies, like old whiskey drunks who go home lonely. Trust. Have no doubt about wet trees dripping onto a gravel road. Rain falls when ready. Sometimes it takes weeks for the sky to gather up its courage. Then it goes wild all weekend, falling first out of mercy, second out of desire. Have no doubt about a river chasing itself down country and pulling everyone else along. Neither lonely nor bored, it does just enough to get by. So what if a roadbed or a cow pasture goes along for the ride? Have no doubt about the hours. They linger briefly, then dive into the stream and are gone. Most everyone follows them down. Uncles, childhood friends, wives, even the kids we raise. We all follow the hours, and you can feel any way you want about it. Have no doubt that what moves you moves everything. A dozen crows circle around some guy asleep on a park bench, and after a while he wakes up in some sort of a panic, and he has no idea why. Everything you touch, doorknobs, bed sheets, lips, mud, credit cards, becomes your life. And us people, we do what we please, returning over and over to the same small pleasures, the same small struggles. No, it's not easy for any of us, this figuring out where to go and what to say. Another one about trust. Trust the city. Trust double-locked doors, trashed stairwells and the alleys they feed, drunks and the bottles they leave, cigarette butts, sidewalk cracks, and every broken chair beside a greasy dumpster. Trust corner kids getting high, the cops cruising by, the game, the lie. Trust gangbang slang sprayed bold on a brick bank, whether or not it makes any sense. Trust gunshots and sirens especially for saying exactly what they mean. Trust mud-soaked tents and rats in the trash, the dude rustling through his pack, the needle left in the grass. The mission preacher's altar call, his happy hymns and dining hall, the Jesus prayer in the toilet stall. Trust girls cursing on the bus and junkies outside Jack in the Box for knowing just what they want. Trust lonely old men too, in their single occupancy room with TV bourbon in their mood. The guy at the off-ramp missing a shoe grips a bent signboard declaring what's true. Everyone needs help sometimes. Trust the long oval return of your faith and your doubt, the desert within, without. And that old redemption song, yours, mine, and everyone else's. You can hear it now, rising from the traffic. Time control. I need to shift my tone of voice here. Time control. Starbucks posts a stupid little warning that its money is kept in a safe protected by a time control device. Seriously? Who the hell is going to care about the cash when they could steal the fucking time control device? Me? I'd snatch the pocket-sized version with a silver racing stripe down the middle and a big blue button you press to make the world stop spinning so goddamn fast. The kind that allows you to make love to the wife before work, then linger over coffee on the back porch until sunset, when you might splash in some whiskey and a spoon of cream. The kind that lets you lose yourself into a framed painting of old growth cedars, in which a small yellow-eyed owl floats just above the lady ferns. With a mere press of the button as you hurry down the hall to your next committee meeting.
I love that one too.
Thank you. More pretty short ones. Are we good? Quitting time. It's here on the longest afternoon of the year with a new guitar man in the bus tunnel and my desk job boring a hole in my chest that I want to say something different about my life. The war on terror. The war on terror. First hints of light on the sound make way for the fog to slip between shoreline firs. Tall grasses bend to whisper about the blue heron plucking small moist bodies from the lapping surf. Imagine an entire civilization depending on one shy, slender bird to lure us all into the tenderness of everything just as it is. What there was. There were no leafless winter trees, no loose wind moving through the branches, no storm clouds gathering over the sound. No dark houses with empty windows, no blackbirds on the roofline, no frozen meadow grass beside the road, no church door, no stone steps, no bent gray men on the sidewalk. There was no memory of a woman no desire for another country, no faith in any words of any kind. There was only a tall man running down the street for the early morning bus. Thank you all.
Okay, well, I have discovered this new form. Well, it's Jericho Brown. It's called, he calls it a duplex. He invented this form. It's a neat form, and I'll show you what it looks like. It's couplets, see, but every line, it doesn't, it repeats something from the previous line, and then the first and last lines are the same. So I'll read, I think I'll read two. I've only written two of these, so I'm going to read them both, whether you like it or not. So this one is called I Am Still Here. I am amazed by living scallops, their scalloped shells and numerous eyes. Mollusks with their blue eyes watching, killed to be sauteed in garlic and butter. Delicious sea scallops sauteed in bitters, eaten with a sip of Sangiovese, red as blood, red as old secrets, the blood of the killed cow, its brisket hissing fat in the fire. The fire dances and spits under sparkles of stars. Black holes lap up suns and moons. Suns and moons spin in their formal dance. We were so young, so unreasonable. We danced our wild, unreasonable dance. I am amazed by the blue eyes of scallops. And actually, it's true that scallops have 200 blue eyes. This I learned recently.
Good to know.
Yeah, just for your information. Okay, so this one again, after Jericho Brown, rice and beans. I begin in the dark, bare feet on floorboards, the daily simples, coffee poured, first words on the page. The daily simples, coffee poured, first words. My journal open while you dream on. I write my dreams while you dream on, as if this house would keep forever. Forever it's rice and beans and swept floors. Times like these, I eschew the news. I eschew news of souls without homes, dreaming on concrete, crawling with lice, dreaming on concrete, crawling with lice. Some were once safe, some are cherished. I am safe at home, warm and dry and cherished. I begin in the dark, bare feet on floorboards.
Tonight here, so that's good.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to read one of my newest poems I read up here, and I was hoping I can read a couple tiny little poems I call micro poems here after I finish this one here. This one here is called Drifter's Breeze. Pieces of time in a drifter breeze. Heartbeat in the feet on the side of the road, moss-grown road, in the shadowed, walking in the dusk. From this strut, lifts head to clear thoughts. To the outmost, the crows listen in from the fence post. Hearing this many times before, from then to therefore, to what stories have been told, amidst to the erode on a one-man road. Feet placing to the road, keeping in view in the light of the turning time. Looking back, in those days, long grown, flowing backbone, give a laugh, never a nay, a handshake, a keepsake. Oh, the jeans tell it all. Under the old hat, many down-to-earth chats, but escape when it's time to avoid a bind. In the blue moon, over the hill, a white-haired owl keeps eyeing on as time changes its way. It's not like it used to be. When it comes, staring in the face, all to the most, just become a highway ghost. Okay, that was one poem here. I got a couple quick ones here. I call these micro poems. They're very short, 2-3 liners. First one is called Roots. A tree stands tall with deep roots. My other one is called Eyes. Glance into the mirror, stare into the eyes. That's where the beauty really lies. Okay, thank you very much.
So this is, I've been doing a series of poems about my treatment in for mental illness. And so the mental illness was brought on by substitute teaching. Okay, all right. So here we go. It's called The Ward. So I want a divorce. The words brutal, the tone unyielding, final. One stage complete, moving on to the mental ward. Volunteering into a realm, no phone, belt allowed, shaving supervised, showers restricted to fixed hours, pacing the corridor under watch permitted. Roommate requested reassignment. I may hurt this old man, don't chance it. The extra space provided my mania a release in exercise. Unwanted loquacity in group therapy sessions was strictly curbed. In a week, the resident handed out a diagnosis. You suffer from manic bipolar disorder. Ominous words accepted in hope of cure. Meanwhile, reached out to other denizens, all young, all dealing with addiction, depression, suicidal tendencies. Nick had read all the poems I had read. We discussed poetry together. It diverted his mind from his nerve-wracking pain. Trent, computer science student, classical pianist, music minor, beat me handily at chess. My derivation of Taylor series left him breathless. Dan, a business major, Paul, engaged in a Bible study. Open a Bible at random and construe the passage. Dan knew his Bible thoroughly well. As I entered group one day, I noticed a breathtakingly beautiful young woman. As I walked past her to my seat, I gasped involuntarily at her facial asymmetry. As I struggled to excuse my gasp, she replied calmly, "Don't worry, it happens all the time. I'm used to it." All patients had to use one phone. Still, friends did call. Their kindness remains a comforting memory. The sojourn in the ward, with all its vicissitudes, was still the harbinger of a final recovery.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm going to read two poems, and once again, I am doing a 30-day poetry marathon with a poet called Lisa Gert, and this is the third time I've done it. So you have to write a poem a day, Monday to Friday, and you get the weekends off. So it's 6 weeks of producing a poem a day. So these are, I think I'm on day 8. So these are some 2 poems from last week. Immolation by proxy. The memory of bone reaches to the grave, and I am paper thin, wrapped in nothing but a candle wick ready to be lit. Go on, give in, set fire to me, for I will burn all the way from my feet in the dust to the stars in the sky. When you walk away from me through the haze of fire and smoke, please, because I am always polite, take the last shred of decency with you. Pretend not to notice that I'm trying to douse the slick flames with my tears. You can never atone for fueling the blaze. There's no heat to your blade as you raise it above my head. I hide even from my angels. I never knew they loved noise so much, the racket they made for my soul, the clanging cymbals, my numinous dreams taken first, while you crouch on the sidelines and watch. That day I lost all fear when I saw you hiding in the refuge you call your life. As I go up, a sudden kaleidoscope of sparks crash into the starless night, light up the heavens for a split second. And the second one, my lights all started flickering. Strange. What if it were easy? What if it were easy to return to the days when I would wake, my left hand curled in pain, knowing all I needed to do was to text you. We questioned how your tendinitis had become mine. I'd remind you it just needed an arnica patch on the ball of your thumb for us to get on with our day in different cities, little knowing our lives were already a Mobius strip of sorts. Remember the day you asked me what it was I wanted most from life? My reply, to write only one book, a book the reader cannot put down, that they read from cover to cover, then read over and over again, the last page as dogged as the first. I think you will, you said. A month later, I dreamed of you walking the desert dunes. In a short hour, I had a poem about it. Even then we knew we would share titles, lines, my words, your words, both of us false gardeners tending to arid lives, both frayed at the edges. On your birthday, I came with closed buds of daffodils laid in parchment paper, tied with twisted jute twine. For my birthday, you brought an enamel tile with sage green flowers and blood red leaves, enclosed in a royal blue box with a matching silk bow. We shed our tired lives, our worn out loves, as we began imperceptibly to serve the other, forged by a mutual desire to move forward, unencumbered by the restless spirits that stirred the wind around us. Now, in this steel darkness, you are breathless, and I have my gifts. These days I know what it costs us both to live.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you. I'm going to read two poems here. The first is Screams. What has this girl child woman endured? Escorted in, escorted out, tall white figures on all sides. I glimpse straight black hair to the waist. Her screams rattle dorm walls, echo down dorm hall. Screams shatter evening studies, dorm room parties. We whisper from room to room, shock, Saigon, temporary sanctuary. Was she one of the lucky ones clambering aboard a rooftop helicopter? I am too timid to knock on her door, and then she is gone. Where is she now, this girl child woman of night screams? Has she returned to Vietnam? A land destroyed by bombs and greed, now traversed by intrepid travelers? How fast these change, borders, politics, people. Not 50 years, not even a lifetime, but for the dead. Where is she now, this girl child woman of war, whose screams still echo. And one more, a little lighter here. Woodland magic. Dusty footprints track the trail before me, tracks no larger than the palm of my hand. My fibulae longer than her femurs and fibulae combined. How many steps hers to mine? Marching, dancing footprints of small pink boots. Baby blonde curls brighten old growth shadows. Her tiny backpack bounces over denim dress. Bear Bear's white ears escape an open zipper. Beside twisted roots, naked knees to forest floor, she peeks inside a small hollow. Leprechauns or elves or woodland fairies, I whisper. Fairies, she sings softly, as though to call them forth. My girl, this child of tiny winged hiking boots, now grown with a child of her own. What wings will her little one wear? What hollows and caverns will he stop to explore? When I follow his small footprints on forested paths, will he imagine magic under mushroom domes? Will he see leprechauns or elves or woodland fairies? Will he sing softly to call them out to play? Thank you.
So I'm going to read one poem. It was first published in Dime Show Review, which is no longer around now, but it was a great journal. It's called I Buried You on a Bright Red Tricycle. I buried you on a bright red tricycle with a bell on the handlebars, while the swing set continued to rust, and the dog, twitching in his dreams, sat near the door, ready to chase you across a field that no longer existed. I cried you 100 million tears, the same number of laughs you made when we sat on a deck to see who could make the silliest faces underneath a full moon, which knew long before we did who the ultimate winner would be. I clawed at you with my bare hands, trying to get past the thick sod and place you on my chest to rest against my heart that keeps on beating like some crazy drummer, frenzied by music that only he can hear. I lost your face one day, so I rushed home in a panic and pushed your picture against me, hoping it would melt in my memory and stave off such shame that I could ever forget again what once whispered serenity.